Imagine moving into your dream home, a cozy little slice of heaven, after years of cramped apartment living. It was supposed to be the fresh start I'd been waiting for, a peaceful retreat, a sanctuary where I could finally breathe. The setting sun on that first evening should have been the beginning of many relaxing nights in, surrounded by a calm and welcoming neighborhood. But instead, it didn't take long before I got my first taste of trouble. Karen, the self-appointed queen of the Homeowners Association, HOA, glaring daggers at the moving truck, arms crossed so tightly it was like she was guarding a vault. She didn't introduce herself with a smile or a friendly handshake. No, she came at me with a laminated list of HOA rules that looked like they'd been chiseled in stone by the HOA gods themselves. No flags larger than 12 by 12 feet, she said, staring me down as if I'd committed a crime. Only beige patio furniture, she added, her lips twisting into a thin, judgmental line. Grass height will be monitored weekly. At first, I thought she was joking, a silly little quirk of a neighbor. But the way her jaw tightened, the grim set of her face, told me this was anything but a joke. It was a warning. Within 24 hours, my mailbox had its first violation notice. Apparently, the moving boxes I had sitting outside were obstructing the visual aesthetic of the community. No, seriously. As if I was intentionally setting up my boxes to ruin the neighborhood's vibe. That wasn't the end of it, though. The next time she saw me tending to my tiny potted basil plants on the front porch, she cited me for unauthorized agricultural activity. I had a hard time not laughing in her face, but I held it together. At this point, I began hearing stories. Neighbors whispered tales of Karen's reign of terror, how she had once tried to find a family for their Halloween pumpkins being emotionally distressing, and another for a dog collar that didn't meet HOA standards. But nothing could have prepared me for the next step in her tyrannical journey. I had decided to throw a small housewarming party. Just a few close colleagues from the police department, a handful of old friends, and some family. Private invitations only, nothing too big. But somehow, Karen caught wind of it. Perhaps through her Neighborhood Watch program, which, as I quickly learned, was less about safety and more about spying on everyone. 2 days before the party, Karen taped a request for event authorization to my front door. She demanded a $50 fee and a 2-day prior notice for any gathering of more than 4 people. I laughed and threw the notice straight into the recycling bin. I wasn't about to let her dictate how I celebrated my new home, and certainly not when the party was on private property. But Karen wasn't the type to take no for an answer. She patrolled the block that evening, muttering to herself, scribbling furiously into her little HOA notebook like a cartoon villain. The day of the party came, and before I knew it, my driveway was lined with unmarked police cars. Off-duty officers had come to celebrate. Some were still in partial uniform from their shifts, and it felt like the most surreal, ridiculous Scenian impromptu party full of police officers and laughter. Karen's blinds twitched nervously from across the street. It didn't take long for her to show up, flanked by her 2 most loyal HOA enforcers, Marge and Lou. Karen stood in front of my house, flustered and furious. "You're in violation of Section 4.2, unsanctioned gathering," she barked, her cheeks flushed with rage, almost purple with effort. I simply smiled and thanked her for her concern before gently, but firmly, closing the door in her face. She stomped back down the walkway like a child who had just been denied candy. But that wasn't the end of it. 5 minutes later, we heard sirens, not the ones from the party, but fresh ones, blaring and urgent. I froze as I saw Karen standing at the end of my driveway, frantically pointing at my house, like she was directing a hostage situation. It turned out Karen had actually called 911, claiming there was a massive, unauthorized party with potential public disturbances, noise complaints, and even suspicious activity. When the officers arrived, they stepped out, saw who was inside, and burst out laughing. My colleagues from the department shook their heads and gave Karen a curt nod before they walked up my driveway to join the party. Karen's mouth flapped open and shut like a fish out of water, too stunned to speak. My captain made a show of inspecting our suspicious activities, casually admiring the barbecue ribs and taste-testing the homemade guacamole. He then declared the house to be safe and secure. Karen, watching from the sidewalk, was left stunned, red-faced. It was clear that this was only the beginning of what would be an all-out war. The first battle had been won. But Karen wasn't done yet. Less than 24 hours later, I was hit with another violation notice, followed by more petty fines, each more absurd than the last. My garden gnome, a simple ceramic frog tucked away in the bushes, was a threat to neighborhood uniformity and warranted a $75 fine. Then came the claim that my guests' cars had damaged communal grass just by brushing against the curb. It didn't stop there. I even received fines for excessive doorbell usage and, get this, a potential allergic hazard because someone had brought peanut butter cookies to the party. Karen's harassment escalated quickly. She was relentless, using the HOA handbook like a weapon. When I finally confronted her, she acted baffled, batting her mascara-caked lashes like she had no idea what I was talking about. "I'm simply upholding community standards," she cooed, her voice dripping with manufactured sweetness. But Karen wasn't just targeting me. I quickly became the cautionary tale at HOA meetings. "Don't cross, Karen," they whispered, "unless you want to be fined for breathing too loud." Meanwhile, my mailbox became a war zone, with fines piling up daily. Even the mail carriers started joking about needing body armor to deliver them. Karen attempted to recruit the neighbors. She started with the elderly couple next door, trying to sweet-talk them into filing supporting complaints about my disturbances. Mr. Jenkins, the former Navy vet, and a man who took no nonsense, listened to her ramble for exactly 2 minutes before politely telling her to get off his Porsche or else he'd turn the hose on her. Her obsession grew. She photographed my trash cans, measured my lawn with a literal ruler, and paced in front of my driveway, scribbling notes like a paranoid detective. She even tried to fine me for feeding birds after I put out a small bird feeder for the local cardinals. Her excuse? It could attract unwanted wildlife. Apparently, sparrows were the true menace threatening our community. My colleagues at work started making jokes about forming a Karen task force, complete with tactical flashlights and citation shields. But behind the humor, I knew the situation was getting serious. Karen was weaponizing the HOA rules in ways that could cause financial and reputational damage if left unchecked. She had already begun surveillance on my house, peeking over fences, hiding behind trees, and even using binoculars to catch me breaking a rule. Enough was enough. I decided it was time to take action. I knew I needed a strategy, something meticulous, bulletproof, and devastatingly ironic. The plan began with small, seemingly innocent steps. I attended HOA meetings, took notes, and asked absurdly detailed questions about every single bylaw. Slowly, Karen began to warm to me, welcoming me like a conquering hero. Behind the scenes, I began collecting evidence, everything from her unofficial fines to her illegal threats and misuse of HOA authority. I also filed formal complaints with the city about her private security cameras pointed at other people's homes, violating local privacy ordinances. The final piece of the puzzle came when Karen launched her new surveillance project, Operation Community Pride, which involved adding more cameras. By doing so, she had violated the HOA charter by spending HOA funds without approval, giving me the ammunition I needed. I contacted lawyers specializing in HOA abuse cases and devised a legal strategy to hit Karen on 3 fronts: a personal harassment lawsuit, a complaint to the city attorney for privacy violations, and a petition for a formal HOA board recall vote. I didn't just rely on legal action. I used social tactics too. I hosted neighborhood BBQs, subtly spreading the truth about Karen's abuses and ensuring the community knew exactly what she was doing. Bit by bit, neighbors began to come forward, sharing their own horror stories about Karen. The support for Karen started to waver, and by the time I had gathered enough signatures for the recall vote, Karen was on the verge of a complete meltdown. When the recall vote was finally held, it wasn't even close. 83% of residents voted to remove her. The cheers from the crowd were deafening, and Karen stood there frozen, like a deer caught in headlights, as her supporters slunk away. The new HOA board took over immediately, revoking every petty fine Karen had ever issued during her reign of terror. In the months that followed, the neighborhood began to thrive. Property values soared, and the community became a beacon of joy and resilience. As for Karen, she tried to move to another neighborhood, but her past was never far behind her. Her reputation had preceded her. She was unable to escape her history, becoming the subject of ridicule and a cautionary tale whispered about at BBQs and neighborhood gatherings. But even after her exile, Karen's obsession with control continued. She tried to worm her way into another HOA, but the residents saw right through her. They Googled her name, found the TikToks, the news articles, and the memes. It went viral all over again. And so, Karen became a legend, a warning about what happens when petty tyranny meets the unstoppable force of public ridicule. Meanwhile, the neighborhood flourished. Freedom Fest became a yearly tradition, and even Mr. Buttons, Karen's former trembling Pomeranian, became the unofficial mascot of the neighborhood. He had been freed from her control and transformed into a symbol of the freedom we had all fought for. Every year, as we celebrated, we remembered Karen not with bitterness, but with laughter and the knowledge that, in the end, laughter always wins. And as for the Karen Survival Guide we created, it became a permanent part of the neighborhood's culturous symbol of how we had fought, survived, and thrived. The neighborhood had not only survived Karen, but we had built something stronger, more joyful, and more connected than ever before. It had become a community in the truest sense of the word. As for Karen, well, she was long gone, but her story would live on forever as the most ridiculous and ironic chapter in the history of our neighborhood. A chapter we would never forget.